in June this year, the highest rate since 2018.
I think that I would have to disagree with that number.
We are not that high. We have crossed our targets were less 4% or less. Unfortunately, it looks like we may cross that threshold.
Meanwhile, NEDA Chief Arsenio Balisacan downplays the peso's weakening against the dollar despite being flagged by economists as a potential barrier to growth. However, Balisacan admits that it may be challenging to hit growth targets for this year.
78% might be a big challenge, no? But still, if you can grow at 6 to 7% during this year, that would be remarkable.
Inflation at 6.1%, that is the highest in almost 4 years. Prices of basic commodities and fuel on a steady rise. The purchasing power of the peso is also sliding. Is there reprieve on the horizon? Welcome to the Chiefs. I'm Roby Alampay. With us online, Pamintuan of the Philippine Star. She's joining us from Manila. Luchi Cruz-Valdes of News 5. She's in Quezon City. And dito po sa Mandaluyong, in studio, kasama natin, Lingao of One News. Chiefs, good evening.
Good evening.
Happy Tuesday.
Puro
Be happy, but
but we'll talk a bit more about all of that. Pero Ami, I mean, of all the things that were mentioned sa briefing ni President Marcos and coming out of the cabinet meeting, the first cabinet meeting of his government, what are some other key takeaways for your headlines tomorrow?
At yung main, siyempre, yung opening ng classes, hindi pa tayo mag-full face-to-face, no? Face daw yung magiging rollout noon September. November pa natin kaya at hindi pa rin medyo sigurado yun. Ano? It will depend on the COVID situation. Saka yun nga, medyo magpepreno ng konti daw sa agricultural importation. Yan ang kanyang, yan ang kanyang main interest, di ba? He's the Agriculture Secretary.
He said, he also said, di ba, parang he wants more protection. Particularly, binanggit niya rice and corn.
Yes.
Oo.
Yes.
Ed, ano pang mga na-monitor mo sa cabinet meeting?
Well, actually, I also want to ask our guest later kasi apparently the President disagrees with the numbers as far as inflation is concerned. So, baka naman he got a different briefing from the economic team.
Well, we'll have to see. Let's call in our first guest tonight. Welcome to the Chiefs. Labor Secretary Bienvenido Laguesma. Secretary Laguesma, welcome to the Chiefs.
Good evening, Secretary.
good evening, sir.
Hi, sir. Magandang gabi.
Yeah. Blessed Sunday, blessed Tuesday, Luchi.
Sana nga Sunday na.
Roby and Ed, maraming salamat for the opportunity again to be part of your program.
Thank you, sir.
Salamat po. Sir, I mean, linawin lang po natin. I mean, to Ed's point, sa cabinet meeting po, and we also had kanina Secretary Erwin Tulfo of the DSWD. Sinabi niya nga, unang nag-present, of course, ang Department of Finance. Was there any presentations there that could have been the basis for President Marcos saying na, tumataas ang presyo ng mga ano, pero hindi naman siguro 6.1%. Was there anything that came up in the briefing that gave him some footing to at least try to reconsider where we are?
Actually, Roby, yung mga nagpresenta, una yung POF, yun siguro yung sinasabi ni Secretary Erwin Tulfo. And we were given a presentation on the medium-term fiscal framework, no? Yung targets and then information related to inflation, also yung import, exports. So that I think the idea is that for each cabinet secretary to be able to situate where their respective departments would be and how they can contribute. Kasi yung isang mahigpit na bilin ni tagubilin ni President Bongbong Marcos is that we should be working together, no? that the right hand should know what the left hand is doing. So yun yung medyo napakahigpit na tagubili ni President Bongbong, so that I think we will really be able to move towards the direction na gusto niyang makita.
Well, in any case po, kung ano man po yung numero, it looks like President Marcos naman was not denying the bottom line. The bottom line is tumataas talaga ang presyo ng lahat ng bagay sa Pilipinas, pagkain, fuel, and of course now, going to your department, and sabi nga po ni President Marcos, sabi nyo, paano ba tayo makakatulong ang each department? There is pressure, of course, on the Department of Labor. On the one hand, people are clamoring for higher wages. At the same time, we're trying to reopen the economy. You have to balance the interests as well of the businessmen and the private sector. Saan po tayo lulugar?
You're correct there, Roby. No? It's really a difficult task to be doing balancing. No? So I think the task for us, the Department of Labor and Employment, is to really make serious consultation, close consultation with the labor sector, which I have already done over the last 2 weeks, even if I have not yet assumed my position officially as Secretary of Labor. And this week, I will be sitting down with the major employers organization. Baon ko yung mga hinaing suggestion, meron din suggestions ang labor sector. At hopefully, in talking and discussing this matter with the employers group, we can come up with some sort of an arrangement which could be mutually beneficial, although hindi siya kagad siguro masasabi natin na perfectong solution, kasi balancing really is a difficult task, no? And we have to put in several factors, no? Like in the issue na medyo malapit sa puso ng mga manggagawa, yung pagtaas lagi ng sweldo. Pero siyempre, dapat isipin din natin ano ang magiging reaksyon niya doon sa iba pang mga sektor, kagaya ng may kinalaman sa mga prices ng basic commodities na parang pag nagtaas ka ng sweldo, sumusunod o minsan nauuna pa yung prices of basic commodities. So really, it's a tough act, but we see this also as an opportunity to be able to really seriously sit down with the constituencies of Department of Labor, and they have actually also indicated that their openness, the employer sector, na they even indicated to me that when we sit down, they have a proposed plan of action, certain suggestions that can address yung mga issues na importante para sa mga manggagawa.
Pero sir, yung wage setting has been devolved to the Regional Wage Board since the late 80s, and that's been a process for the last 30 years. So I suppose the question in a lot of people's minds is there any move in the direction of centralizing wage setting on a national level? Kasi as it is right now, hindi naman po kayo magde-decide yan. Kanya-kanyang Regional Wage Board yan eh.
Totoo yun, Ed. Kasi yan ang nasa batas, yung RA 6727. And I do recognize that. So if ever there will be a change in the modality of how do you adjust or fix wages, that should be subjected to another legislation. No? Kung ang intention ay magkaroon ng national o isa lamang, yan dapat siguro magkaroon ng amenda yung umiiral na batas. No? And what I pointed out actually when we talk about minimum wage fixing is that it seems to me that discussions have merely focused on adjustment of wages, no? Without regard to the other important component of the function of the boards, no? It has something to do with productivity. Yung kailangan siguro pag-ukulan din ng pansin ng mga boards yung aspeto sa productivity, nang sa ganun naman mabalanse yung adjustment at maging tama din ang batayan, no? Kasi I pointed out na there are 10 factors when you do try to sit down and discuss ano ba ang tama, ano ba ang appropriate. No? Kasi wala naman talagang absolute na katanggap-tanggap na wage adjustment through the years. Nakita ko yan. And even I also pointed out that it appears to me that the process which should have been technical, dapat merong kaalaman yung representative ng labor at saka management. Parang nag-focus lang sila lagi dun sa contentious na magkano bang idadagdag. Sasabihin naman ng employer, wala kaming kapasidad, maliliit. Which is also true na mas marami ang small and medium as well as micro enterprises. So it's really a tough act for the boards, no? But I think we have to emphasize na they should have to look into the other factors like inducing countryside development, no? Kaya nga merong regional And then trying to have employment generation as well as family income. And that is where yung direksyon na sana makalikha ng karagdagang hanap buhay, magkaroon ng katuparan na sa isang pamilya na merong 5 miyembro, sana merong 2 o 3 na nagtatrabaho para magkatulong-tulong.
Secretary, actually tough challenges yung hinaharap nyo ngayon actually across the board, lahat-lahat ng departamento. Kumusta yung mood nyo kanina? Kasi first cabinet meeting ni President Marcos. How was he and how were the cabinet members? Ano yung pakiramdam doon? Crisis mode ba kayo?
Hindi naman, excited. Ang karamihan na excited. At saka nung nag-start na yung cabinet meeting, inspired, no? Kasi hindi naman monologue sa presentation, we were allowed to comment, raise some suggestions or raise questions, and make clarification. So it was actually not just an informative but rather an enriching experience. I have the opportunity to look back, no? Kasi medyo sabi ni Luchi na I'm an old hand. So I tried to also situate myself several years back. Ano ba yung na-experience ko, no? And I think yung sa mga dinaanan ko, kagaya ni FDR, ni former President Cory at saka lalo na ni President Estrada dahil naging sekretary ko doon. Sa dalawa kasi undersecretary ko and every now and then nakakaupo ko as an acting secretary. So parang iba rin ang pakiramdam ko, no? Na medyo parang this is really a learning experience for me and I'm looking forward to the next cabinet meeting dahil binigyan kami ng pasabi ni President Bongbong. Today we have 5 departments, no? Kasama pa yung Department of Agriculture. Nagpresenta si President Bongbong, no? So we were intently listening kung ano yung direksyon. And then after the presentation of the different departments, sabi niya, yung mga susunod maghanda na, no? So sabi ko baka next in line na ako, dapat mag-prepare ako.
Wala siyang general instruction. Wala siyang general instruction sa inyo.
Ang isang pinakamahigpit, yung general, para sa lahat, you should work together, no? Yun nga, dapat yung kaliwang kamay, alam yung ginagawa ng kanang kamay at ang kabuuan ng isang katawan dapat pumupunta sa isang direksyon, no? And the next na medyo mahigpit na taga-builin, reviewin ninyo ang mga priorities ng department ninyo at tignan in accordance dun sa mga budget, no? Kasi yung mga ibang department, meron silang mga nasabi, ganito na lang ang natira sa programa, paano titignan natin yung ganito. Especially in the case of the DOTR, no? Na siyempre tuloy-tuloy yung programa na pang-ayuda doon sa ating mga commuters, doon sa ating mga involved sa public sector, sa public transportation sector. So, iyon, medyo ni-raise din at merong na tignang mabuti paano tayo makakatulong. Kasi I'm sure you have also gathered that yung sa mga estudyante, pag nag-start ang ay may libreng sakay din ng mga estudyante, no? And then the subsidy can be continued, no? But in all of these programs, there will always be need for resources. And the challenge is how to find yung nasaan ba yung mga resources na pwedeng magamit at makatulong dun sa sambayanan.
Sir, kanina po sa balita, nasabi daw na ayaw niyang magbawas ng tao. Naroon po ba kayo? That he stressed out that that's the one thing that he does not want to do right now. What was the context of that declaration na hindi siya magbabawas ng tao?
Meron kasing isang na nagsabi na sa kanyang departamento ay merong sa kanyang initial na assessment dahil ilang araw pa lang naman kami, 2 araw pa lang kami. Ang initial assessment niya parang sobra yung mga tao and ang sabi nung nag-raise nung concern na yon ay parang hindi niya magugustuhan o hindi niya gustong makita na mayroong mawawalan ng trabaho. And the general answer also is that should be the general framework, no? Although that has to be taken in the context ng MC1. Nadinig naman din yung MC1, yung mga co-terminus, yung mga iba na siguro mayroong mga kapalit. And yun yung framework, no? Pero overall, kasi nga ang trust ng ni President Bongbong mag-create ng additional opportunities, mga dagdag na trabaho. So ano siya, parang complementary yung kanyang sinabi na yon. Dapat as much as possible kung merong maapektuhan, try to situate or yung relocate them para nang sa ganun ma-absorb din sila, no? So yun yung yun yung framework ng Luchi. Na hindi naman talagang, kasi alam naman natin in any sabi nga nila, di ba, parang yung tinitingnan yung bureaucracy, gano'n na ba kalaki ang bureaucracy niya, sinusuportahan ng buwis.
Pero sa kabilang banda po nun, sabi rin ni President Marcos towards the end of the cabinet meeting, sabi niya, I am giving you free rein. You have the authority, magrekomenda kayo structure-wise on how to be more efficient, baka, especially you, somebody like you, sabi niyo nga po, you've seen the many permutations and the different ways the Department of Labor, for example, has been organized and structured. Eh, sinabi niya, kung may suggestion kayo on how to be more efficient, how to be leaner, essentially, by all means, make that recommendation. I don't think that necessarily is in conflict with what he's saying na masakit magtanggal ng tao, no? Na ayaw, hindi naman yun ang sinasabi ko. But to that point of making the organization leaner, do you have ideas? And is this in fact something that the Department of Labor will have to look at?
Yes, Roby, tama yung sinabi mo. Yun yung pronouncement ni President Bongbong kanina. Yung parang may free hand ng mga department secretaries dahil sila naman yung directly involved silang titingin I don't think it's also fair na lahat yan si Presidente. Kaya nga ang Cabinet Secretary, alter ego And you have to make your recommendations on the basis of how you assess yung iyong sariling departamento, no? Kasi even in my case, I have to look at ways of really streamlining the Department of Labor and Employment with the idea of making it a mean machine, no? Mean machine, being able to be responsive, action-driven, and then talagang nandyan yung mga tao na nagsiservisyo. Although titignan din natin yung meron kasing isa din presentasyon na dapat ito take into account when we try to strengthen and streamline the bureaucracy, yung tinatawag na digitalization, no? Kasi yun yung masabi siguro natin way of the future And the discussion there has centered into trying to minimize, if not totally eliminate, discretion, and then making it really in terms of being able to deliver services expeditiously, so that there will be ease in doing business. And I think towards that direction, we can probably see that the idea is really to provide an environment na medyo conducive for investment or further investments.
Secretary, nabanggit niyo ba, napag-usapan niyo ba yung contractualization? What are your plans about it?
Hindi pa, Ami, kasi hindi pa ako nasalang So, pinaghahandaan ko na rin yan, no? Kasi sa ilang mga pakikipag-ugnayan ko sa labor sector, akin pong binigyan din na sa ilalim ng umiiral na batas paggawa, kinikilala naman yung legitimate contracting out of services, no? Specifically yun sa construction industry, no? Pero having said that, overall dapat siguro tingnan mabuti yung tamang pagpapatupad kung ikaw ay nag-i-engage sa contracting out of services. Hindi yung nakikita natin na merong abuses pagdating ng 2-3 days before, yung iba nga 1 day before yata pagdating ng 6 months bibigyan na lamang ng working papers. I don't think that should be the practice, no? And this is one of the things that I will bring to the attention din ng employers, because at the end of the day, I think they also have some solutions, no, to be able to address this, no. So hindi pa, pero pinaghahandaan ko na rin, Ami, at Luchi, Roby at Ed, kasi napakainit niyan bukod sa usapin ng pasahod, yung usapin tungkol sa kasiguruhan ng trabaho, napakahalaga yan para sa mga
Pero sir, hindi yan nga, nasa paghihimay yan ng definisyon kung ano yung legal na contractualization at ano yung hindi dapat pinapayagan.
Tama Ed, pero gusto ko rin sanang makita, i-simplify para wala na yung room na nagkakaroon ng friction dahil sa misinterpretation o kanya-kanyang pagtingin. No? So, part nung na yung pwede namin gawin sa Department of Labor and Employment, no? Dahil merong pwedeng gawin dyan, mandate or within the ambit ng legislature kung magpapasa sila ng batas, no? At doon kami mag-i-input. Pero in the meantime, na yan ay hindi pa nagkakaroon ng pagtatalakay, sa Department of Labor and Employment ay akin ng hiniling yung mga issuances na kumbaga sa makakatulong upang yung mga nakikita o nirereklamo ng mga manggagawa na hindi tamang paraan o pamamalakad, sana magkaroon kami ng solusyon at medyo ma-lighten namin o mapagaan namin yung mga usapin may kinalaman dito sa issue ng contractualization.
Secretary, graduation time ngayon Ano kaya yung nakikita niyong available jobs for the class of 2022?
Hindi ko pa natignan yan in detail. Kasi yung una-una, I was trying to put the house in order. No? Pero on this side, kasi pinatitignan ko na yung PhilJobNet. Meron kasi I'm sure you have heard about the PhilJobNet of the Department of Labor and Employment. No? And I also made mention about yung bang, ano ba ang impact ng job fairs, no? Na every year or every now and then, pag may okasyon, merong job fairs. No? Pero parang medyo gusto kong tingnan mabuti. Bakit naman may announcement ng ganitong karaming trabaho, bakit ang nakukuha lang ay ganito kaliit, no? On the spot, no? There must be something that can be done to improve the process, make it easier doon sa mga aplikante, no? At dapat siguro talaga maging functional yung aming PhilJobNet at yung accessibility diyan ay medyo mapagaan. Kasi marami pa rin tayong mga pangkaraniwang manggagawa na naghahanap ng trabaho. Gusto pa rin nila yung may kaharap silang tao, may kinakausap Medyo kinakailangan siguro makadevelop din kami ng sistema kung wala pa. No? Kasi sa ngayon, magbuhat kanina, na-absent nga ako dahil nag-cabinet meeting. Meron na kaming performance assessment ng lahat ng mga ahensya, opisina ng Department of Labor and Employment na gagawin hanggang sa Huwebes. No? Ang layunin, ano ba yung pinangako ninyo na performance ninyo at nasaan na kayo, yung budget na inukol para doon sa dapat ninyong gawin, nasaan na, nasaan stage na kayo, ano ng klase ng utilization ninyo para nang sa ganon, maintindihan din namin nung kasama ng aking mga bagong kasama saan tayo pupunta, ano ang possibility ng recasting ng budget at paano tayo makakapag-deliver ng services in accordance with the resources na existing. At the same time, kasama kasi sa strategy ko is partnering with different organizations. No? In fact, just to last Saturday, kahit na Saturday at gabi, nag-attend ako ng isang Rotary event, no? Distrito, where I articulated the need to partner with them kasi lahat ng mga Rotary clubs, meron silang mga tinatawag na livelihood projects, community development. And I thought that partnering with them, where the Department of Labor and Employment can provide technical assistance, can have a multiplier effect. No? And that Rotary district has something like more than 100 clubs. So, and I think within this week, we will be signing a memorandum of understanding where there will be commitments from that distrito and the Department of Labor and Employment. I would like to replicate this throughout and not limited to the Rotary groups, but also yung mga business sector. No? Siguro, for example, kagaya ng Bankers Association of the Philippines, no? Yung Hotel Owners Association of the Philippines, to name a few. No? Pero kasi may listahan na ako ng mga gusto kong mag-avail ng networking sa kanila at hopefully we can encourage or convince them na doing this will be actually good, not just for them. No? Yung kanilang meron naman silang programa tungkol sa corporate social responsibility. In fact, today I got a letter from one organization. Sinasabi sa akin na open sila na makipag-partner sa Department of Labor and Employment. So these are to me these are very encouraging signs, and I look forward nga dun sa meetings ko sa mga employers group where they will also try to extract their commitment na tumulong sana rin tayo rito dahil yun naman maganda dahil meron naman kayong available na resources. Pwede nating ituon dun sa mga pwedeng maka-reduce ng poverty, makabawas dun sa mga concerns ng mga ordinaryong manggagawa, kasama na rin yung pangkaraniwang mamamayan.
Secretary, speaking of partners, we're almost out of time, but I just wanted to ask you, ano pong within government itself, meron kayong kapartner ngayon, may Department of Migrant Workers na ngayon, under Secretary Susan Ople. How do you see that dynamic growing, and ano po yung hatian ng trabaho? And how is it going to be different, do you think, from the engagement you already have with POA and OWA? What does the Department of Migrant Workers bring to the table? And for that matter, what are, I don't know, if any, potential risks that need to be navigated between the two departments?
Roby, meron na kaming pag-uusap ni Secretary Toots Ople. Siguro nakatatlong meetings na kami. At meron na kaming more or less final joint advisory intended to really impress na services should not be disrupted, should not be affected. At naka-outline na doon yung aming kumbaga sa commitment how to really fully operationalize the Department of Migrant Workers during the time na wala pa silang full complement, wala pa silang budget na para sa 2023. Dahil meron namang mga opisina under the Department of Labor and Employment na ma-absorb nila, yung mga corresponding budget nun saka personnel, we will try to facilitate already within a short period of time. In fact, kayong kauna-unahang siguro makakaalam na magpipirmahan kami ng joint advisory sa Huwebes, sa Thursday, to formalize yung aming partnership, yung aming pananaw kung paano namin smoothly malipat yung mga dapat nang malipat. Of course, always subject dun sa applicable rules and regulations kasi yung budget na ngayon na malilipat sa kanila, accountability yun ng Department of Labor and Employment. So I'd like to make sure that yung proseso ay masunod, matama at magkakaroon kami ng formal na pirmahan ng aming commitment para sa Department of Labor and Employment at saka sa Department of Migrant Workers sa darating na Huwebes. Anting ko sa hapon kasi meron akong consultation sa umaga sa employers group. So yan yung yan nakapaloob yan yung aming nakita na dapat ay aming maging commitment at gusto naming tiyakin na yan ay mangyayari para nang sa ganon yung kanyang mga constituency, particularly the overseas Filipino workers and those the agencies would be properly guided, Roby.
But Secretary, sundutin ko lang yun. Does that mean that habang wala pang sariling complement at wala pang sariling budget at nagtatransfer kayo ng departments and mga tao, does that carry any risk of thinning out the capacity and the resources for either or both departments, at least temporarily?
Meron siyempre epekto. Pero yung kasing malilipat sa kanya, yun yung mga naka-identify, Roby, sa batas eh. And I think since nandiyan na yung batas, we will try to do it also under the help assistance ng Department of Budget and Management kasi we fully recognize na hindi naman makapag-operate ang isang opisina kung wala siyang resources, both manpower and financial resources. So yung ginawa namin na aming pipirmahan nga sa darating na Huwebes, yun yung nakita namin na sa ngayon, siguro hindi siya yung talagang perfecto or absolute, pero nakapaloob siya within the bounds of the law.
Okay. Secretary Laguesma, maraming salamat po. Labor Secretary Bienvenido Laguesma.
Thank you, Secretary.
Salamat,
Thank you,
sir.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
We will talk about the rising inflation rate and the shrinking peso and what they mean to the ordinary Filipino. That's next on The Chiefs. Stay right there.
Welcome back to Chiefs on One News. The country's annual inflation surged to 6.1 this June, marking the third month in which the price index goes above the official 2 to 4% target band. Let's put the numbers in context. And joining us via Zoom is economist and the president of the Pamantasang Lungsod, Manila, Professor Emmanuel Leyco. Professor Leyco, thank you for joining us and welcome back.
Good evening, Professor.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, and thanks for inviting me back.
Well, thank you, sir, for joining us. Sir, of course, the PSA saying inflation hit 6.1% in June, and then the president saying he disagrees with the numbers. And possibly the number would be closer, more or less, to 4. Do you see any indication, any indicators that could make you doubt the PSA's numbers?
Well, PSA is the most authoritative source. It's a government agency, and I don't have any reason not to believe them. They're very good with what they're doing. They're doing the surveys, they're watching the numbers. And it's not just the schools, it's not just the economists who are using their numbers. Everybody who's doing business in the Philippines is basically using PSA numbers as their indicator for price movements in the country.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think there's basis for the president when he saying that this inflation rate is important? In effect, he's saying that inflation is something that's affecting all nations globally, and especially the United States, of course, and Europe, and with the dollar being as strong as it is, and with many of our prime commodities basically, priced based on import, he thinks that that may be the reason why it's probably not 6.1%. Is there any basis to agree with that assessment?
I didn't exactly hear what the president said, but from what we've been reading, from what the Philippine Statistics Authority has been saying, the numbers are quite reflective of the trend in the country and also reflective of how we relate to the other countries. And it is true that we are highly dependent on imports, and therefore we are also importing the inflation from the source countries. So if the prices are going up in those countries, the landed price in the country will also go up. So that is partially true.
Yes.
And it reflects what's going on in other countries. And 6.1%, while it's not as high as it is in the U.S., it is troublesome for us already.
Are we headed for stagflation? Because that's what everybody's actually, I mean, that's the worst case scenario for many economists, no, and pundits. Are we headed for stagflation at this point?
Of course, there's a potential for the economy to slow down in the middle of a rising prices or high inflationary regime. So yes, that is a possibility. But right now, it looks like the economy will continue to grow, considering that we are starting from a very low base. Remember, our economy went down,
Yes.
In 2020, a major dive. No? So in 2021, we recovered a little bit. But we are not back to the 2019 numbers yet.
We're not, yes. But they've also scaled down the growth rate for this year.
Inflation?
Yes, Secretary Balisacan has said that we will probably not hit the 7 to 8% growth rate that we were hoping to hit. Is that necessarily a warning sign of sorts, or not really?
Well, everybody...
We're just managing expectations.
Everybody is talking about global or potentials for global recession caused by high inflation. Remember, the U.S. is not used to having 9% inflation. They're only... No. In our case, 6.1 inflation from 5.1 or 4.6, in the previous years. No, this is the highest in the last 4 years. No, 2018 was the highest, or about the same inflation rate. But right now, 6.1. In the middle of a recovering economy, it's not good, because it has the potential to hold back our economic growth, not necessarily cause another slide, but it could. It could if we're not able to manage. Let us not manage expectations. Let us manage reality. No?
Yeah, Professor.
And the reality is that the prices of oil continues to increase. It has hit almost $120 per barrel. That is high. And it doesn't look like it will settle down. It doesn't look like it will come down in the very near future. So I think we have cause for concern in watching the numbers. Plus, yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, go ahead po. Tapusin niya lang po. Please finish your thought.
Yeah, I was about to add, in addition to the oil price hikes because of disruption in the oil supply, kasi sabi ng US, wag na kayong bumili sa Russia. So, nag-shrink ang supply available to the global market. With the economy opening up in the world, this is the worst time to shrink the oil supply, because everybody is looking at supply to energize the economy. So this is the worst time for that to happen. Now, with the oil price increasing, here comes another factor. No, the dollar to peso exchange puts the peso in at the lower end of the deal. No? So that means that we need more pesos to be able to buy dollars that we will use to buy oil. So that those factors are really contributing to the inflation of the country today.
Ipatong ko na lang po yung all the other things. Let's make it even more complicated. It is also a factor of fuel, but it is also its own factor now helping to drive inflation, food. And to that point, this is something that the President kept repeating, food security, food security, food security. We have to keep it under control. We have to somehow have a strategy and control for that. For two reasons, sabi niya, unang-una, kailangan natin lahat kumain. And secondly, it is, as we said, its own driver of inflation as well. Now, he did say that to that end, on the one hand, kailangan natin, he recognized the competitive advantage of other countries that have cheaper rice. People were reading into that as an importation strategy. But at the same time, after the cabinet meeting, sinabi niya rin, we have to have more protection for rice and corn in particular. Do you see a clear strategy coming together that's clear enough on what is the strategy for food security?
Well, in a perfect scenario, if you have the money, you can buy or you can import from countries who produce the goods cheaper than we can. So, if we have the money, but the world is not perfect. No? We don't have enough money to sustain our imports. So, we look at the OFW money, no? $2.4 billion a month coming in, which we can use to buy to pay for our imports, but we cannot sustain an import activity with purely OFW remittances. That will run out, but right now our international reserves still pretty good. They're estimating that we have at least 6 or even 8 months worth of reserves that will enable us to pay for our imports. So we're still in good shape, but not for long. If we continue to be a net importer, prices are going up, and we are not able to sustain our own requirements, that will definitely put us at a disadvantage. So I agree. We need to have food security that will be based on a strong agricultural economy. And right now, if that is the direction that the President is taking, that is, I think, a welcome development. But that will take more than policy pronouncements. It will take some time before we are able to rebuild our agricultural economy.
Yes, that's long-term, Professor. No? And if we're importing inflation, what can be done short-term within the year to tame inflation? Because it looks like you're saying things getting worse now before they get better. What can be done?
Major factors for inflation looks like the cost of importing oil.
Fuel, yes.
Fuel. So for us, since we are not able to influence oil price fluctuations in the global market, something that we can do is right here in the country. So let's take a look at the landed price. The landed price of petroleum in our country is increased by the excise tax.
Yes.
And of course, the value-added tax. So the only flexibility that we can exercise is the option of either suspending, reducing, no, or altogether remove excise tax from oil, from fuel.
Pero excuse me, ang argument nila dyan ang makikinabang lang daw are the rich. What do you think of that argument? That's what they keep saying in resisting the kahit reduction or suspension of the taxes, excise and VAT.
You know, they can always say that the rich will benefit. Of course, because it's so difficult to distinguish in the pump station. You say, are you rich or are you poor? Or should I, if you are lining up to buy fuel for your BMW or your Mercedes, no, I will charge you higher, I will charge you taxes or not. But you cannot do that. So that is the reality, no, part of the perhaps unpleasant or unexpected benefit that you will give to others who should not. But there will be more gains, I think, if we are able to, say, control the prices of fuel, no, in the country. Because the recent inflation numbers show that transportation increased by, I think, 17%. No? So 17.1% ang transportation, and that is mostly due to the cost of fuel. So the rich naman, it will not, if they find fuel least expensive these days or more affordable for them, it doesn't mean that they will double up their consumption and they will double up their benefits. I don't think so. If they will just benefit because they will have more money, no? But at the same time, the poor who are relying on transportation, public transportation, the jeepney drivers who are buying fuel, they earn less, much less. In fact, they are now stopping operating their jeeps because they cannot afford the fuel anymore. So yes, there will be positives, there will be negatives, but I think in general, the positive effect will prevail.
Pero sir, the argument that they present is that you can give targeted subsidies to, for example, jeepney drivers, as had been done in previous months, in which case they may be able to alleviate the pressure on drivers to raise fares and so as not to affect commuters. So how do we strike that balance po?
Well, I think, again, in a perfect environment, that's okay. You collect and then you distribute. Unfortunately, when you collect, there is a cost. No? So perhaps it costs you 10 centavos for every peso that you collect. And then it costs you another 10 centavos when you distribute. So right there, you lose 20 centavos for every peso. Meanwhile, if you don't collect and you just let the people keep the money in their pockets, the money will continue to circulate in our economy. I will not be worried about that, particularly the poor. If the poor have the money in their pockets, the first thing that they will buy is food. I think there are established studies of consumption patterns, spending patterns of the poor. The first thing that they will buy is food. And I think that will be good for the economy when they have enough money in their pockets. And remember, the household consumption represents more than 60% of our GDP. So if we weaken the purchasing power of the households, that will definitely affect our economy. Our GDP will be affected.
Sir, bubukod lang ako ng konti. Ibang topic naman na a few days ago, the President vetoed House Bill 7575 creating the Bulacan Airport City Special Economic Zone. Now, among the issues, the major issues that Malacanang cited were fiscal issues, the need to strike that balance between the need to raise money versus the need to draw in more investments. I was reading the bill. It didn't strike me as granting any particularly specific or special incentives to investors in that economic zone compared to other special economic zones. I'm wondering lang if you read the bill and if you've seen any new incentives granted under this bill. Or is it just simply that Malacanang does not want to create new special economic zones because of the fiscal crisis?
I think it's more of the Clark economic zone that is already there.
The proximity.
It's not very far. So why, to them, I think, why create another economic zone? Why create or open a new airport when you already have the Clark airport, you have the economic zone? For me, I think the more economic zones you have, the more airports we have, the better for the country. China's economic development was pushed by economic zones, special economic zones that they set up. For every state, for every part of the country, they have more than one economic zones. And I think that will be better if we have Clark and we have Bulacan and elsewhere. The more economic zones we have, that will be a better indicator that the economy is getting more activity.
Okay. Pero sa the other side of that nga is incentives may translate to revenue loss. I mean, that's another way of looking at incentives. I'm wondering lang how that balance is to be struck. Kasi I also remember that was one of the arguments being made in rationalizing the corporate tax structure. Kasi ang dami raw na special economic zones na dekada nang may incentives na hindi naman nagde-deliver. And so we've been losing money along the way.
Well, that is also true. However, I think in general, the more economic activities we have, the better for the country. Now, we can also take care or shape up the tax structure, like what they tried to do with Create. That's what they tried to do with Train. But I think more of the tax administration issues should be looked at rather than closing up on opportunities where we can create more jobs, where we can collect more revenues. Look at the tax holidays. How long are you giving them? You give them for 5 years and you never stop? Or should you give them only for 5 years and after that reduce the tax holidays?
Professor, I want to revisit something kanina kausap namin, the new Labor Secretary, Bienvenido Laguesma. And we started off, of course, talking about wages. There's pressure for the labor sector, asking for more wages, itaas ang sahod. At the same time, we're trying to reopen the economy, and there is that perennial balancing act, of course, weighing the interests as well of investors and the entrepreneurs, especially the small and micro. What are some things that the Labor Department and government can do to balance these two interests?
Well, definitely there should be non-negotiables here. For example, security of tenure for the labor should be a non-negotiable. You cannot offer the country for investors who violate labor security of tenure in the country. And I don't think we should offer the country for just having cheap labor. I think competition goes beyond being cheap. I think in terms of the quality of our outputs, the quality or productivity of the country should become more of an incentive for investors to come into the country, not just the cost of labor. We have, I think, when they say we have the costliest or the highest cost of labor in our region, I don't exactly believe that. No, I think you can become more competitive not just by way of how low or how cheap your labor is, but also because of the quality and the productivity of the labor factor in our country, and also the products that we offer in the region. Kasi kung ang ilalagay lang natin yung mga ang tawag dito, taga-hinang, taga-solder, no? Madaling madaling palitan, ano? Actually, yung robotics are already replacing human labor. So hindi dapat maging competitive advantage natin na cheap tayo. Ang sa atin, dapat ipakita natin na mas mahusay ang ating mga laborers kumpara doon sa mga ibang countries.
Very quickly, what would you say are some quick lessons and takeaways from the Duterte administration that this administration can seize upon, whether it's best practice or a missed opportunity or outright mistakes?
Well, I think it's not only from the Duterte administration, but I think there was a missed opportunity to use the OFW remittances to be invested back in more productive activities. Rather than use the OFW money for consumption, I thought it would be much better for the country if we could have channeled the remittances to something more productive rather than consumption. Marami tayong billions of dollars coming in every month. Pero they come in and they go as fast as they came in. Kasi lahat imported eh. So one way of keeping them in the country is to rebuild our agricultural economy, our industry, so that we don't need as much importation that we've been doing for many decades now. So it's not just the Duterte administration, but I think with the rise of the continuing rise of the labor migration, it will be a mistake to continue using labor migration as a major strategy for our country. And I think it goes back to the first Marcos presidency. We allowed or we even encouraged labor migration to different countries because we were running out of dollars. No? So our migrant workers saved the day for the Philippines by sending back millions and then later on billions of dollars for the country. However, instead of investing those dollars, we were remiss in continuing to or rebuilding our industries. So, yun ang nangyari. Meron tayong remittances, it went to consumption, and our consumption are mostly taken up by our imported goods.
Professor, we're almost out of time, but just one quick follow-up. To that point, the creation of a department for migrant workers, does that to you necessarily signal the same direction that you think might be folly?
No, from what I hear, the department is supposed to take care of the welfare of our OFWs, but we already have the OWA, yung Overseas Workers Welfare Administration. I think that should be able to do the job. But when it comes to formulating a strategy for our economy, wherein our economic benefits coming from the remittances or the contribution of our OFW sector, I think that can be addressed by NEDA, no, or Department of Finance or Department of Trade.
Okay.
We need to rebuild the lost competitiveness of our country's industries.
Okay, Professor Leyco, maraming salamat po.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor.
Professor Emmanuel Leyco is President of the Pamantasan ng Lungsod ng Maynila. And that's all we have for this episode of The Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. Mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines. I'm Roby Alampay.
I'm Mami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Luchi Cruz-Valdes from News 5.
I'm at Lingao and we are One News.